Hello, everyone. Naturopathic Dr. Ellie Klein here. And today I'm going to answer a question. What is the worst food that you can have for your health, for your heart, your arteries, but your health in general? And for those of you who've heard this before, I'm sorry to beat the same old drum, but I don't think enough is said about this. And so, if you've been my patient, a client, a student, then you probably know the answer. And if you forgot, then great. This video will serve you well. And if you haven't heard this before, then this is really important for you to hear. So this came as I decided to make this brief presentation, as a result of a question that I was asked, and I'm going to read it to you. This question basically is as follows. I watched your latest video and I have a question about polyunsaturated fats. You say that saturated fats like butter and coconut oil and monounsaturated fats like olive oil are better than polyunsaturated fats like many of the vegetable oils. But this is the opposite of what other sites like the Heart and Stroke say about polyunsaturated fats. They say polyunsaturated fats are better than saturated. I use mainly grapeseed oil for cooking, which is polyunsaturated. Should I change this to either olive oil or coconut oil? I try to limit butter as much as possible. For example, a little on bread or on steamed vegetables. I eat lots of nuts and fish for omega-3 and vitamin E. I limit sugar and processed foods a lot. I also take your healthy heart powder, but maybe not every day. What should I change? Okay, so uh, I'm not going to, can't really tell you what to change in terms of, can't really treat you here, but hopefully the following is going to be helpful. So I wanted to provide some perspective, and in order to do that, I'm going to share this two-slide presentation with you. And this, let me see, share screen. Hopefully you can see it now. Okay, so basically this shows three graphs on this slide, and they represent consumption patterns over the last 100 years or so, a little more, of saturated fats that are derived mainly from animal fats, of course, carbohydrates, sugar, and polyunsaturated fatty acids right here. And let's start with the saturated fats. And so this is in my book, Read This If You Have a Heart, and this is on an article on my website and other pieces of information I produced in the past. And as you can see, the consumption of saturated fats started declining quite drastically back in since the 1940s and so on. So we're eating a lot less saturated fat than we used to. And over the same period of time that this decline occurred, the incidence of cardiovascular disease and chronic disease has gone up. And a lot of emphasis has been put on avoiding or minimizing or limiting sugar and carbohydrates. And as you can see, indeed, the consumption of sugar and carbohydrates has gone down over the past 25 years or so, while the incidence of obesity in this case has gone up. And of course, obesity is closely related to cardiovascular disease and chronic diseases as well. Whereas the consumption of polyunsaturated fatty acids have gone up quite drastically over the same period of time of since 1909, since this type of data has been collected. And this is the only thing that really mimics the rise in the incidence of chronic disease, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, all these chronic diseases. And so there you go. Now, why is the Heart and Stroke Foundation promoting polyunsaturated fatty acids? I think, well, canola is one of their donors. And if you go on Google and just type up the history of saturated or polyunsaturated vegetable oils, or just the history of vegetable oil consumption of vegetable oil in diet or something like that, you'll learn some interesting facts about the way this has come about. And this really comes down to biochemistry, and I don't want to get into too much detail, but basically what makes an oil saturated is the presence of hydrogens. It's fully bound to hydrogens through and through, and that makes it very, very stable and not prone to any disruptions, it cannot cause any oxidation, cannot be oxidized itself. Monounsaturated fatty acids, mono means one, it lacks hydrogens in a single location. It's a bit less stable, but still pretty stable. And finally, the polyunsaturated fatty acids lack hydrogens at multiple locations, often more than two. And this makes it very, very prone to peroxidation, oxidation, and becoming a harmful substance in essence. Over here, one of the metabolites, so basically, let me go back. Fat, one of the things fat can be used to is to produce energy. And the way the body does it is it splices off 2 carbons at a time and then modifies them and changes the molecule through and through a cycle called the Krebs cycle and so on, where energy is produced. And it's very easy to break down a saturated fat and relatively easy to break down a monounsaturated fatty acid, but the presence of multiple double bonds in the polyunsaturated molecule makes it, it doesn't burn easy. It burns in a dirty way, so to speak. And so you end up with toxic byproducts like this one, for example, full hydroxy 2-nonenal. And there are others as well. They're listed here, glyoxal and acrolein. On the omega-3 side, there's MDA, and these are responsible for age spots, brown spots. But let's look at HNE, for example. And if you type it up on Google, this is one of the first things you get. A highly toxic and most abundant stable end product of lipid peroxidation has been implicated in the tissue damage, dysfunction, injury associated with aging, and other pathological states such as cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and inflammatory complications. And basically, both the polyunsaturated fatty acids from vegetable oil and their derivatives block the ability of the cells to produce the energy they need to function properly. And when that happens, well, they don't block it entirely. It's not a black and white, but over a period of time, they diminish the ability of the cells to function properly, and it expedites aging. And depending on what cell it is, the tissue and organ that the tissue organ that is made from these cells would suffer. And the other thing about these oils, they're also implicated in thyroid disease. They increase the stress hormones. So they increase the production and presence of the stress hormones that are perceived by the body as stress. They're estrogenic in nature, so maybe that's why some of these diseases, including cancer. So a harmful substance. And one of the things that this reader mentioned was that she uses vitamin E. And let me just get out of here. And vitamin E is actually the natural way, nature's way to protect against damage from polyunsaturated fatty acids. If you recall in the last video, I showed that there is this antioxidant defense system specific to lipids, to vegetable oil type lipids that consist of vitamin E, first and foremost, vitamin E, vitamin C, and NAD+, which is a derivative of the vitamin niacinamide, vitamin B3 niacinamide. So taking vitamin E is good. It protects against damage from polyunsaturated fatty acids, but comes down to supply and demand. And are you overwhelming your system with too much vegetable oil? Is there enough vitamin E in the system? And even beyond that, again, it's when the body breaks it down, you end up with toxic byproducts, and it's not a good thing, right? And certainly in academic circles, medical school, naturopathic medical school, and conventional health circles, I think the essentiality of the essential fatty acids, omega-6s, omega-3s, which you get from the vegetable oils and so on, I think it has been overstated. And there's good scientific data to back it up. We need a little bit of that, really small amounts. So a little bit of fish, a little bit of eggs, and a little bit of perhaps liver or chicken would provide plenty of that. So hopefully you found this helpful. And I think that this is really such an important point. This type of food is the worst thing that you can have. And whenever they talk about sugar or carbohydrates being bad for you, that's a source of energy. But the polyunsaturated fatty acids block the cell's ability to utilize that source of energy. And then the perception is it's bad for you. Of course, don't have processed carbohydrates necessarily. You want to have healthy ones, but this is by far, 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 far worse. Okay, well, hopefully this is helpful. Take care. Be well.